Hannah was a quiet sophomore, the type of student who preferred the company of books over crowded dorm parties. She often stayed late in the library, which was fine with her. She liked the silence, the faint smell of old paper, and the way the echo of her footsteps seemed to belong to another time. One chilly October night, she found herself tucked away on the third floor, the oldest part of the building. The campus library had multiple wings, but the archives section was the eeriest. Few people went there, not because it was restricted, but because it felt wrong somehow. The air was always heavier, colder, and the fluorescent lights had a habit of flickering as if they were barely clinging to life. At first, Hannah ignored it. She had her headphones in, typing notes furiously for her upcoming midterm. But when she went to reach for her coffee, she noticed her phone screen was on. She hadn't touched it. The camera app was open, and several pictures had been taken. Her thumb froze above the screen. There were 5 photos, all of her. The first one was innocent enough. She was sitting, hunched over her laptop, unaware. The second one looked almost identical, except it was angled slightly from the left, as if someone had shifted to the side. The third was closer. The fourth was from behind her shoulder. And the fifth, her heart thudded when she saw it, was of her looking directly into the lens, eyes wide, though she had no memory of turning her head. Her first instinct was to laugh it off. Maybe she'd somehow brushed against the phone, maybe it had glitched. But deep down, something about those angles felt impossible. Her phone had been flat on the desk the entire time. A faint whisper broke the silence. She froze, tugging one earbud out. The sound came from the back of the archives, behind the rows of forgotten books. It was soft, indecipherable, like someone mumbling to themselves. Hannah told herself it was just another student, but she knew she was alone. The librarian had left at midnight, and she'd watched the last 2 students pack up long before that. Still, she forced herself to stand, gathering her things with trembling fingers. She slid her laptop into her bag, snatched up her phone, and began walking toward the stairs. The whispering grew clearer now, though she couldn't make out words, just a low, steady sound. She quickened her pace, her sneakers squeaking against the tile. As she reached the stairwell, the overhead lights flickered violently, buzzing like angry insects. In that stuttering glow, Hannah saw something move between the shelves. A tall shape, a shadow where there shouldn't have been one. Her breath caught in her throat. She shoved the door to the stairwell open and nearly ran down, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out every other sound. At the bottom, she paused, trying to calm herself. Maybe it was her imagination, she told herself. Maybe she'd just been too tired, too stressed. But when she finally glanced down at her phone again, a new photo had appeared in the camera roll. She hadn't touched it since leaving the desk. The picture was of the stairwell door, just moments earlier, and peeking through the gap in the doorframe was a pale face, blurry but unmistakably watching her. Hannah's hands shook so violently she almost dropped her phone. She bolted out of the library into the crisp night air, gasping, checking over her shoulder every few steps. The quad was empty, silent except for the rustling of leaves. She rushed all the way back to her dorm, locked the door, and shoved the phone under her pillow like that could erase what she'd seen. That night, she barely slept. She kept replaying the images in her mind, especially that last one. Who had been behind her? How had her phone been used? Without her touching it. The next morning, she returned to the library with 2 friends, desperate to prove it had all been in her head. But when they checked the archives section, something made them stop in their tracks. Her coffee cup was still sitting on the desk where she'd left it. And on the dusty wooden surface, just beside the cup, were fingerprints. Long, smudged prints, far larger than her own, streaked across the desk as if someone had been leaning inches away from her all night. After that, Hannah never studied alone in the archives again. But sometimes, when she scrolled through her phone late at night, she swore she found pictures she didn't remember taking. Pictures of her sleeping, pictures of her walking across campus, And in the background of nearly every one, that same blurred, pale face. Ryan had always been skeptical of the ghost stories surrounding his dorm. Built in the late 1800s, it was the oldest residence hall on campus, with creaky wooden floors and pipes that groaned through the night. Students often whispered about strange noises and unexplained shadows, but Ryan laughed it off. To him, it was just the natural soundtrack of an ancient building. But the footsteps bothered him. At first, he dismissed them. Late at night, while scrolling on his phone or working on assignments, he would hear faint steps pacing back and forth above his ceiling. The problem was, he lived on the top floor. There was nothing above him except the locked attic, which hadn't been used for decades. The first time he heard it, he thought maybe it was a raccoon. But the rhythm was too precise. Step, step, step. Sometimes it stopped right above his bed, lingering, before continuing again. The second night, it returned, louder, heavier, as if whoever, or whatever, was up there wanted him to notice. He tried mentioning it to his roommate, but the guy brushed him off. "Dude, you're overthinking. Old buildings make noises. Chill." Ryan wanted to believe that, until one night when the sound grew unbearable. The steps didn't just pace, they ran. Heavy thudding raced from one side of the ceiling to the other, so loud the light fixture shook. His roommate sat up in bed, pale. "Okay," the roommate muttered. "I heard it too." The next day, Ryan went to the resident assistant, who confirmed the attic was locked and no one was allowed inside. Still unsatisfied, Ryan decided to see for himself. He followed the narrow hallway until he reached the wooden attic door, its faded paint peeling, a heavy padlock clamped onto it. He placed his ear against the wood. Silence. Just when he thought maybe he'd imagined everything, there came a knock. A loud, sharp, deliberate knock from the other side. Ryan jerked back so fast he almost fell. His chest pounded, but curiosity warred with fear. He leaned closer again. Another knock. This time, it was followed by a long dragging sound, like something being pulled across the floor. That night, when he returned to his room, a folded piece of paper lay just inside his door. No one had been in his room, he always locked it. Hands trembling, he unfolded it. In scrawled, jagged writing, the note read, "Stay out of the attic." His roommate swore he hadn't left it. The RA claimed no one else had keys to their room. Ryan tossed the note in the trash, trying to laugh it off as some prank. But deep down, dread coiled in his stomach. The footsteps only got worse. Sometimes he'd hear scratching too, like nails raking across the ceiling. Other times, it sounded like something crawling. One night, as he lay in bed, the air grew icy cold, his breath visible in the dark. The ceiling above him creaked slowly, as if something heavy was kneeling directly over his head. He pulled the blankets up, heart racing, when, suddenly, 3 knocks pounded in perfect rhythm against the ceiling. Boom, boom, boom. The next morning, Ryan begged the maintenance crew to check the attic. Reluctantly, one of the older workers agreed. He unlocked the padlock and pushed the door open, dust swirling into the air. Ryan expected to see boxes, maybe old furniture. Instead, the attic was almost completely empty, except for one thing. In the far corner was a small, rusted metal bedframe, its mattress long gone. Deep gouges scarred the wooden floor beneath it, as though someone, or something, had been chained and dragging themselves back and forth. Ryan's stomach dropped. He felt watched. He turned quickly, but nothing was there. That night, he tried to sleep with headphones in, music blasting to drown out the sounds. But at exactly 3 a.m., his phone died suddenly, the room falling into silence. A moment later, the footsteps began again. This time, though, they weren't above him. They were in the hallway. Step, step, step. He sat up, his blood cold, listening as they stopped right outside his door. Then, 3 slow knocks, echoing against the wood. His roommate whispered from the other bed, voice shaking, "Ryan, don't open it." They never spoke about it again, but the knocks returned every few nights, always at 3 a.m. And every time Ryan passed that attic door, he swore he could hear faint scratching from the other side, like something waiting for him to come closer. Chris was the type of student who rolled his eyes whenever ghost stories came up. His friends called him the skeptic, because he had a sarcastic explanation for everything. Shadows were just tricks of the light, cold spots were faulty insulation, and eerie sounds were always old pipes or creaky floors. So, when he heard the rumors about the abandoned science building on the edge of campus, he laughed. Students claimed strange experiments had once been carried out there before it was shut down. Some said they heard screams late at night, others swore they saw figures moving in the windows even though the place had been locked for decades. Chris decided to prove them all wrong. One Friday night, his friends dared him to spend the night inside. With a cocky grin, he accepted. At midnight, he climbed through a broken basement window, flashlight in hand. The air inside was heavy, stale, with a faint chemical odor that burned the back of his throat. The hall stretched endlessly, filled with peeling paint and rusted lockers. His light beam caught old lab tables, smashed glass beakers, and a chalkboard still scrawled with faded formulas. At first, it was exactly what he expected, creepy, but nothing supernatural. He texted his friends selfies, making exaggerated scared faces, and joked about how haunted it all was. But around 2 a.m., the atmosphere changed. He was exploring a second-floor lab when he heard something. Not pipes, not the wind, something dragging across the floor. Slow, deliberate, like heavy limbs being pulled. The sound echoed through the empty building. His flashlight beam shook as he aimed it toward the noise, but the hallway was empty. Probably a raccoon, he muttered, trying to steady his breathing. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. The dragging grew closer, louder. Chris backed into the lab, pressing against the wall. The flashlight flickered, and in that split second of darkness, he saw it. Something crawling. It was human-shaped, but wrong. Its arms bent at unnatural angles, fingers long and bony, nails scraping against the tile as it pulled itself forward. Its face, or what resembled a face, was pale and distorted, eyes hollow black pits. Its mouth hung open, though no sound came out, only the dragging of its body echoing through the corridor. Chris's breath caught in his throat. He bolted, running down the stairs, his shoes slamming against the concrete. The dragging followed, faster than it should have been. He reached the basement, nearly tripping, and sprinted toward the broken window he'd climbed through. He glanced over his shoulder, nothing there. Panting, he scrambled outside into the cold night air. Relief flooded him. He had made it. He was safe. But then he noticed his arm. Thin, red scratches ran down the length of it, fresh and stinging. He hadn't brushed against anything. He hadn't fallen. His stomach turned. When he met his friends the next morning, they laughed at his pale face and trembling hands, until he showed them the scratches. Their laughter died instantly. The marks didn't fade. Days later, they grew worse. Thin cuts appeared on his chest, his back, even while he was in class. He'd wake up at night with blood on his sheets, new scratches burning across his skin. His friends begged him to see a doctor, but no medical explanation could be found. The doctors shrugged, baffled. And then the dreams began. Every night, he dreamed of the science building. He'd be walking the same hallways, flashlight in hand, but he could feel the creature crawling just behind him. Sometimes he woke up screaming, convinced he'd heard dragging noises in his dorm room. Other times, he woke with his flashlight still in his hand, though he swore he hadn't brought it to bed. One night, around 3 a.m., his roommate shook him awake. "Chris," he whispered, trembling, "why were you standing in the corner?" Chris blinked. He hadn't been standing anywhere, he'd been asleep. But his roommate swore he'd seen him in the corner of the room, standing stiffly with his head tilted, whispering something to the shadows. After that, Chris avoided sleeping. He grew pale, paranoid, and restless. His friends noticed he wouldn't sit with his back to a wall, wouldn't stay on campus after dark, and flinched whenever someone mentioned the science building. Weeks later, one of his friends found him sitting outside at dawn, staring at the ground, his arm covered in fresh bloody scratches. When asked what happened, Chris's voice cracked as he whispered, "It followed me out." He never returned to the science building again. But every now and then, students swore they saw him walking across campus at night, pale and shaky, dragging one leg as though mimicking something crawling. And in hushed voices, they asked each other the same question. Was Chris still himself, or had something from the abandoned lab come back wearing his skin?